When you begin to research these true words, abad and shamar, which means to work and to keep, or to serve and to guard, when you begin to look at these words and how they are used in later Scripture, where you find them occurring over and over and over again is in relation to the responsibilities of the priests in the tabernacle and the temple that was built there on the mountain in Jerusalem. Let's look at a couple of examples of this to kind of set the tone of what I'm saying here. Numbers chapter 3, God is giving the instructions to Moses for the Aaronic priesthood that is to serve in the tabernacle that is being built there in the wilderness. And he tells Moses to bring the tribe of Levi near and set them before Aaron the priest that they may minister to him. They shall keep guard over him and over the entire congregation before the tent of meeting as they minister at the tabernacle. They shall guard all the furnishings of the tent of meeting and shall keep guard over the people of Israel as they minister in the tabernacle. You see the same two Hebrew words that are used in Genesis 2:15 repeated several times in the course of this passage. These priests were to keep guard over the high priest Aaron, and they were to keep guard over the entire congregation of Israel before the tent of meeting, and they were to work or minister or to serve at the tabernacle. They were to guard the sacred furnishings of the tabernacle, the sacred utensils that were used in the offerings of the sacrifices there before God. They were to guard them, they were to keep them, and they were to minister in the tabernacle. We see this again repeated in Numbers chapter 18, verses 5 through 6, where God says that Aaron is to keep guard over the sanctuary and over the altar. Now get this, that there may never again be wrath on the people of Israel. And behold, I have taken your brothers, the Levites, from among the people of Israel. Remember, the Levites were the tribe from which the priests were drawn. He said, I've taken them from among the people of Israel, and they are a gift to you, given to the Lord, to do the service of the tent of meeting. So you see the use of this term to serve or to keep, or rather to serve or to work or to labor within the temple, and that they are to keep and guard the sacred utensils and the sacred furnishings of the temple, and they are to do this in relation to the nation of Israel, that the wrath of God does not break out on the nation of Israel. All of this is taking place within the confines of the tabernacle and then later the temple. And what's interesting about this, you see this combination of this word usage, abod and shamar. You see these two Hebrew words used 10 times in direct relationship to the priestly functions within the tabernacle and the temple. So we see, first of all, that Adam's responsibility, and this is your first bullet point, Adam's responsibility to work in the Edenic temple by maintaining its upkeep and order, as well as his duty to keep and guard its sanctity, literally foreshadows or precedes the responsibilities of the priest in the later tabernacle and temple. Now here's where we begin to add weight to this evidence here from Genesis 2:15 that Adam was indeed a priest functioning in the Edenic tabernacle. We begin to see weight added to this because immediately after God placing man in the garden and telling him to work it and to keep it, what takes place in verses 16 and 17? God gives Adam his first command. You remember what that command was? Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat thereof you will surely die. We have God issuing His first direct command after He has placed Adam in this garden temple or this garden sanctuary. What is interesting about that is we go over to the book of 1 Kings, and you remember David had prepared everything for Solomon to build God's temple there on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. And when Solomon completes the building of this temple, I want you to look very carefully at the language that God uses in speaking to Solomon. Look at this. And as soon as Solomon had finished building the house of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the dwelling place of God, the dwelling place of Jehovah, God said to him in verse 6, if you turn aside from following me, you or your children, and do not keep or guard my commandments and my statutes that I have set before you, if you go and you serve or work for other gods, worship other gods, if you do that, then I will cut off Israel from the land that I have given them and the house that I have consecrated for my name. Do you realize how often that formula is repeated in the Old Testament? God gives the command to serve Him as God alone. He gives that command and tells His people to jealously guard His word and to guard His commandments, with the consequence that if they do not do that, they will be expelled from the land that God has given them there in Canaan. So we see this priestly concept in Genesis 2:15 through 17, in that God says you're to work the garden, you're to serve in the garden, you are to keep the garden, you're to guard the garden and the sanctity thereof, and then He immediately gives Adam a command. The first negative command that is given, you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The day you eat thereof, you shall surely die. So we see here that Adam is to keep and to guard the commandments of God, that he is to serve God by working in the garden. He's to worship God in this garden, and his failure to do so will result in his expulsion. In the day that you eat thereof, you will surely die. We'll get back to that in a moment. Another piece of evidence that speaks to Adam being a priest in this garden temple and his guarding priestly functions, another piece of evidence that points to that is the figure of the cherubim, or the cherubim, as some would pronounce it. Remember the cherubim. Where's the first direct mention of the cherubim in the narrative of the book of Genesis? Chapter 3, when Adam has sinned, he's rebelled against God, he is driven from the garden, and God places flaming cherubim there at the entrance of the garden to what? Guard the way to the tree of life. So we see this figure, this angelic figure, this cherubim, if you will, that is practically functioning as a guard so that the tree of life is protected and guarded. Now, what's so powerfully interesting about that is we see this idea of cherubim played out through Scripture. Where else do you see two cherubim prominently in the Old Testament?